So looking at this standard, you can see that standard 3 is on life science. So think back to last year to biology, and we should be reviewing everything from from biology. So there are 3 strands. I think there's 3, not 4. 3 strands in this one. The first one is over structure and functions of living systems, and there's 4 to 7 questions on the standard, the NESA test in April that will be over 12.3.1. So 12.3.1, students investigate and describe the chemical basis of growth, development, and maintenance of cells. So in order to do this, be able to identify the complex molecules, carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, nucleic acids that make up living organisms. So carbohydrates, can you give me an example of a carbohydrate?
Yeah.
Sugar, which is glucose. And then, yep, sucrose, fructose, all those good. Lactose. There's also a galactose.
Do we have to know what it looks like molecularly?
Nah, no. Okay, lipids. Those are fats, yes. And steroids and cholesterol. Where do you find a lot of fats? Common place for fats that are used in your belly, not including adipose tissue. Cell membranes. Oops, not a P, B. Yep. Cell membranes are made up of fatty acids. Remember, they have it's called a phospholipid bilayer. And they have what?
They have like a chain on them.
Yep, they have 2 chains. And they have the fatty acid chain on them, yes. Nucleic acids. What do they make up? DNA. DNA and RNA. Yeah. And then proteins, enzymes are proteins. They're in the muscles. They make up. Yes, they're very important. Proteins are made up of smaller molecules called amino acids. Of amino acids that make up proteins. Remember that term? Nucleotides. Nucleotides make up nucleic acids. Okay, I don't know if there's really much else. We'll go on. Okay, identifying the form and function of subcellular structures that regulate cellular activities. Do you guys remember what these are called? What all these things are?
What they look like?
Organelles. So here's the term right here. Or they're all organelles. So cell membranes are in what kind of organism? Animal and plants. Right? There's a cell membrane in animal and plant cells. Cell wall is in what kind of organism? Only the plants. Makes it more rigid. Chloroplasts are in plants. And what are they good for? Why do we need chloroplasts?
They take more vitamin from the sun and make it into chemical energy.
And what's that process called?
Photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis. Photosynthesis occurs in the chloroplast. What's the stuff that's in there? What color are they?
They're green.
Because of why?
Depending on the plant.
Chlorophyll. Alright, and not all chlorophyll is green. There's red, orange. That's why, like in the fall, when leaves turn color, the green gets absorbed back into the tree first. Yep, and you're left with all the other colors that are left. But green just is predominant, so you see green. Red, orange, yellow. Like blue-green algae, I think their chlorophyll is blue-green, yeah. Think about leaf colors, any leaf color. They're more red. Yep. Okay, cytoplasm. What is the cytoplasm?
Cytoplasm is where all these things are. No, it's the fluid surrounding.
So the fluid that's inside the cell membrane, where the organelles are all floating around in there. Mitochondria. What is mitochondria? Powerhouse. That's what we call it. We nickname it the powerhouse because what does it produce? In the form of what?
ATP.
ATP. Right.
Graham, how do you know this?
What kind of cells would have a lot of mitochondria?
Muscles.
Muscle cells, right? Because you have to use a lot of energy in your muscle cells. Nucleus.
That is the
Control center. Center stores DNA. It's where RNA is produced. Okay, we already said these are all organelles, so let's go on to ribosomes. What do they do?
Those make protein.
Yep. Produce proteins. And what do they, I don't know if they'll get into, like, there's 2 subunits for the ribosome, and, ooh, that one's missing, isn't it? Yeah. So there's smooth,
They're like round.
ER. Oh, none of that wrote. Why didn't that write? And then there is so smooth ER. What does smooth ER produce? No. No. Produces lipids. Smooth ER produce lipids. They produce them. And then rough ER. Why is it called rough? What does it have on its surface? Has ribosomes. So it produces what? Yep, protein.
Cells.
I don't know if you can read that very well. But they have ribosomes on their surface, which means they produce proteins. And then there's one more missing. Where does everything that gets produced in the ER, where does that go first? Before it leaves the cell? The Golgi apparatus, right, is the packaging center. Isn't that called the UPS? You know what you guys call it? Golgi apparatus. So everything from the smooth ER, they're in vesicles, and they travel to the Golgi apparatus, and they get modified. So modify before leaving cell. And then they would transfer those out. Oh, cilia? We'll see if there might be another slide with those on. And flagella, microvilli. Those are all projections from the. What's vacuole? store water. Okay. You guys spend a lot of time in that biology, on that stuff, right, in biology? Okay, now look at all these cellular functions. Oh boy. Photosynthesis, respiration, cell division, protein synthesis, transport of materials, energy capture and release. So active transport. What does active transport require? Requires ATP. And usually it moves substances against the concentration gradient. He's in A&P. We studied all this again. So it goes from, usually substances just normally go from high concentration to low concentration. That's passive transport. But active transport, you take from the low concentration and you force it out to where there's a higher concentration. Cellular respiration. It's how they use energy, how cells use energy. And cellular, there's active transport, there's osmosis, passive transport. I don't know what to really write for that. So, I don't know. We have active transport. Let's put osmosis. You guys remember what osmosis is? Just the transfer of water. Active and passive transports. Active transport and passive transport. Okay. Enzymes, how are they used? Yep, catalyst, right? Catalysts speed up for reactions. And what ending?
ASE.
Yep, if it has an ASE ending, that usually means that it is an enzyme. Like one in A&P we're talking about in this chapter is acetylcholinesterase. So it has an ACE or metabolism, that is all the reactions in the body. So using energy and also producing energy all go into the body's metabolism. Passive transport does not require ATP, and it goes with the concentration gradient, opposite of the active transport. Photosynthesis does what, Remington? You told us before. Yes, from what? So, yep. So we use, well, actually, let's put conversion of sunlight. It takes sunlight, and what else is required? CO2. And it uses water, right? H2O. Conversions of sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water to O2. O2 and glucose. And that's the chemical energy that they talk about, because the energy is stored in those bonds. And then when animals use the glucose, they break up the bonds to produce ATP. Okay. Protein synthesis. I'm going to erase this stuff so I have a little more room. Oops. Transcription versus translation. Okay, this is both part of protein synthesis. So we're making proteins, but it is in 2 steps. So when you transcribe something, what does that mean? You write it from what?
From knowledge to book.
You're copying it, right? The scribes back in the day before they had printing press. Yeah, so that's how they used to copy all the books. They'd have them write them by hand. They just copy them, which is why they didn't have many books back then. So we're making a copy of DNA into RNA. That occurs in the nucleus. So we pair up the nucleotide bases. Remember, A pairs with T, C pairs with G, and T pairs with for RNA it's U, right? But you're going to copy DNA into RNA. That's in the nucleus. So then the RNA leaves, and the ribosome attaches to it, and I don't think you need to know the specific steps. But that is the translation, is when RNA is used. And remember codons, anticodons. We have codons that the 3 base pair codon, like AAG or something, that would stand for 1 amino acid. But RNA is used to build a protein. Amino acid chain, which would be built into a protein then. Okay. I don't think you'll have to know the different steps in that. Okay, selectively permeable. Right. The cell membrane only allows certain substances to pass through. Only allows certain substances to pass. Okay. And then aerobic versus anaerobic. This is with O2. Anaerobic is without O2. Which one can you make more ATP with? Aerobic, yep. You can produce like 38 ATP with aerobic means versus 2 for anaerobic. Pretty close, yep. You really don't need oxygen. Okay, describe how an organism senses change in its internal or external environment and responds to ensure survival. So a stimulus, what are some of the different stimuli that you could have? Smell. Chemical. Touch. Light. Autotrophic organisms. Did you guys learn about the plants that will grow towards the sun, like sunflowers and stuff?
Yeah.
Yep. They are. This light is the stimulus. Anything else? Okay, 3.2 is on heredity. genetics. You guys spend a lot of time in biology, I know, on genetics. Punnett squares, yep. Yep, big R, little r. Phenotypes and genotypes. Okay, so identify information is passed from parents to offspring and is coded in DNA molecules. We already talked about DNA, and inheritance is how the information, that whole sentence above, the identified information passed from parents to offspring, that is how things are inherited. And then there's two different kinds of traits. Okay, we have dominant and recessive. Dominant and recessive. And there's also you have your genotype and phenotype, right? That you can pass on. Huh? Oh, is it? Okay, we'll wait to explain the difference on the next slide. Okay, describe the basic structure of DNA and its function. So double helix, that's the form, that's the structure of it. Yep. What is mitosis? Produces two identical cells, right? So you have one cell that would split into two. So yeah, you do your claymation video. Is there anything about, does we have the phases on any of those slides? Or should we go through it now? Okay, let's go through what are the phases of mitosis? Remember the saying, PMAT? So, prophase. And telophase. What does most of the cell's life is spent in which phase? No? Most of the cell life is spent in which phase? Interphase. So most of the cell life is spent in interphase. And then mitosis is just that little tiny sliver of the cell life cycle. And then that little tiny sliver is split up into these phases. Right. Nucleotides, they're what make up DNA, right? Okay. Recognize how mutations can help, harm, or have no effect on an individual organism. So those mutations, don't you have did you guys talk about point mutations and crossover and? Oh. Right. Right. So there's. I don't know what you're talking about, but yeah. Okay, so there's deletion, insertion, and shift. Yeah.
Yeah, it goes it was like the have was, and then all these 3-letter words, and then change.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now describing that sexual reproduction results in a largely predictable variety of possible gene combinations in the offspring of any two parents. So alleles, what were alleles? Yeah, okay. So when we had like big R, little r, each of those are an allele, right? Genotype is what? I'm going to put genetic code, right? That's the order that the genes are actually listed out in your DNA. Versus, let's skip down to phenotype is, yeah, what you actually see, the physical trait.
Wait, so genotype is like little r and big R?
Right. And then phenotype is what you would actually see. Like brown eyes because of your genotype, though. Your genotype affects your phenotype. Heterozygous versus homozygous. Can I just write that? Can I put big A, little a like that? And then homozygous would be like big A, or little a. You guys know what that means. Yep. Production of gametes, yep. So it goes through the phases of mitosis, but then it goes through one more division. So we have 4 daughter cells. Ooh, and then a nice Punnett square. Let's do one. Because a question I'm sure will be like, yeah, what % chance do you, and it will be simple Punnett squares. I don't think it will be the complex ones, but it probably will not be a 64 one. Did you guys do fruit flies or not?
Yeah. And the sex length thing.
Mm-hmm. So let's say this is the parents. Little r, one's homozygous and one's heterozygous. And so what % would be homozygous?
Homozygous would be 25%. Wait.
Ah, yeah. 50% homozygous. And the recessive, homozygous recessive, right? Yep, I know you guys spend a lot of time on that stuff. Okay, life science, flow of matter and energy in ecosystems. Last one. Students will describe on a molecular level the cycling of matter and the flow of energy between organisms and their environment. Shh. Colby. Explain how the stability of an ecosystem is increased by biological diversity. Now, questions for this one will be more like, if there's an increase in predators, what's going to happen to... Yeah, and so different things like if there's more rainfall, which increases the amount of grass available, what would happen, okay? Trophic levels, that would be like the bottom would be the plants, and then the next level would be whatever eats the plants, and then whatever eats those animals, and yeah, the food chain as it goes up. Those are the trophic levels. Recognize the zebra sheets? Oh yeah, I forgot about Mr. Hill as your student teacher last year. So we know what an atom is. We talked about that on 12.2. The biogeochemical cycle, just how different chemicals are reused throughout the system. So is on the next one of the slides, is there like, because there's the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, the water cycle. Okay, those would be the biogeochemical cycles then. So you'd have like the water cycle, the carbon cycle, nitrogen. Can you think of any other ones that you talked about? I don't think you really need to know a lot about them. So, what do we got next? Biomes. Ooh, that's like your, don't you, oh, I don't know that, did you guys do a video project with your biomes last year or not?
Yeah.
With the green screen?
Yeah.
Okay, your class did, but then he didn't do it last year or this year. Okay. So the biomes are like the tundra, savanna. I'm not going to go. Coniferous forest, isn't there? And deciduous forest. Steppe. Desert. Plains.
Tropical rainforest.
Yeah. Okay, so you have all, those are all biomes. Okay, predator and prey relationships, again. What happens if different stresses are introduced on the environment? What happens to the predator and prey? Yep. I don't know what they mean by biotic versus abiotic. Living versus not living. I mean, that's basically what it says, but I don't know what else, what other kind of questions there would be. Yeah. Yeah, abiotic would be rock. And abionic.
I remember talking about it in the show picture.
Okay, analyzing factors which may influence environmental quality. So environmental quality probably will have questions about pollution. Possibly like fossil fuels. What are some of the fossil fuels? Oil, gas, natural gas. Yep. Versus renewable resources.
Water, air, sun, trees, waste, bodily fluids.
Oh, there's 4 standards. I thought there were 3 for this one. Biodiversity. Identify different types of adaptations necessary for survival. Morphological, physiological, and behavioral. Ooh, what's the difference between morphological and physiological?
Something physically changes.
Physiological doesn't change.
They grow in
I'm really not for sure. I don't remember what the difference is. One of them when you see the picture of like a dolphin fin versus a wing or something. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Parasites. Some parasites are not symbiotic. What does symbiotic relationship mean?
When they live together happily,
Both benefit, right. So they both benefit. So some parasites can be symbiotic, but most, the ones that you think of, will usually be not symbiotic because they would be harmful for their host. Right, that's the kind of parasites that would be symbiotic. I'm really not sure what kind of questions there would be on that. Tomorrow? Yeah, we'll see what it is. We'll talk about it if it's on there tomorrow. Recognize the concept of biological evolution is a theory which explains all this different things. You can kind of look through it, but genetic variability, so like thinking about birds' beaks. I know you talk about birds' beaks a lot and how they are adapted for different food sources. That would be genetic variability. When you have different variables that would have different, the parents have different variables, there would be, you'd spread the genetic variability. Yeah. What what else he would say here. I'm trying to think of what kind of questions they would actually ask about this. I don't know. Fossil record. I guess one thing about the fossil record, and this should be kind of obvious, where are the oldest organisms located? Lower, right? Older organisms are found lower in the rock sediment layers than the newer, younger fossils. Yep. Okay, let's go over this question because I don't think that this term was on our list. So, what do you guys think? For a human arm and a dolphin pectoral fin are similar in structure and origin, but are used for different purposes. This is what type of structure? I have C, homologous. Homologous.
What's analogous mean?
Because they have the same structure but different function. So analogous, I think, would probably be the same function, yeah. Homologous, yeah. Okay, movement of a frog from one population to a different population may result in which of the following? Genetic variation, right. He brings in a new genetic code into that population.